play and wait till it ends, and then I'll. Good afternoon again. Hey, Lyndall coming to you again with Marshfield Old School Times. Just completed our first podcast of the day with Mr. D. Lewis and had a great time with Mr. Lewis, and Barth helped me with that. And now we're honored to have our state senator, Curtis Trent, with us today. Curtis, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. Curtis and I served together in the Missouri House, and then when Senator Cunningham, Mike Cunningham, termed out, Curtis, actually, I guess Carla was in there for a minute, wasn't she?
Yeah, it's actually because redistricting. You've had several different. I guess I'm the third one in 4 years or something like that.
That's
so
right.
yeah,
Carla
it's been kind of wild.
Carla Esslinger ran for the seat that Mike held, and then the redistricting, and so Curtis is now our senator, and he's a good fella, and I got to know him pretty well when we served in the House, and so I'm just glad that you could be here today. And I thought it would be good for all of our viewers to just get a little more acquainted with who their elected officials and representatives are. It doesn't matter which party. Curtis does happen to be a Republican, as most all the office holders are here in Webster County, but I think it's good. We've had Mike Cunningham's been on the show. John Black, Representative Black's been on the show. And we certainly, Stan Whitehurst, our county clerk, and we'll have others in the future. Today happens to be the Webster County Lincoln Days over at Seymour, and so Curtis was in the area and asked him to come by, and he gladly accepted the invitation. So we're glad he's here today.
Yeah, no, it's always good to be in Webster County, good to be in Marshfield, and make quite a few trips because there's always something going on. People to talk to, constituent services, all kinds of stuff.
So. Absolutely. So Curtis, your territory. Why don't you tell them kind of what areas you have now with the district redistricting?
Okay, we've got a pretty long district. It's Barton, Dade, and Webster counties in their entirety, and then Greene County outside of Springfield. So nothing really inside of the Springfield area, but all the surrounding county.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a straight line across all the way to Kansas, I guess.
Yeah, all the way to the Kansas border.
We're on the east edge of your territory.
Yeah.
And you tell us a little bit about, we like to start our shows with a little bit of background, a little bit of biography of who you are, where you're from, your folks, your family, your siblings, and so forth.
Yeah, happy to do that. So I grew up just a little bit to the south of here in Ava, Missouri, a little small farm. My dad was a refrigeration repairman. My mom was a farm girl. She worked in the family business. It's kind of a mom and pop shop. So that's sort of the environment that I grew up in. Like I said, we did have a small farm. We kind of joked that the only crop we really grew was rocks. But we'd perch a few cows on top of the rocks, and that was a nice way to round out. We of course we had a garden and chickens and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I grew up, feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs and, feeding the cows occasionally and kind of doing a little bit of the farm work and helping Dad occasionally with the business where I could. My parents, insisted I get a good education. They insisted I go to church. That was really the only two expectations that they had of me, I think. Education was always very important. As I was growing up, I used to go to the Douglas County Public Library about once a week and check out as many books as I could, and I'd try to read them all, and then get a new batch the next week. I'd go every Saturday, and a lot of times that would coincide with us going to the farmers market and selling a little bit extra produce or something like that, or blackberries. I grew up picking blackberries too in the summers, and that was how you got your pocket money, was to pick a few blackberries. Mm-hmm. Was able to go to college after graduate high school. was very fortunate to be able to get some scholarships and some help to do that, and so ended up being my parents were the first in the family to graduate high school. I was the first to graduate college, and then went on to law school. Undergrad was at the time SMSU, now Missouri State, and then law school at St. Louis University. Practicing lawyer right now. I do estate planning, probate work in and around the region. Um, and so that was sort of my upbringing and my educational background.
And you graduated from Ava?
Yes, Ava High School.
Ava High School.
Mm-hmm.
What year was that?
'02.
'02. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you actually, when you were there, let's see, was Carla Esslinger? Was she a teacher?
Yeah,
there?
she was. I think either the superintendent or the assistant superintendent, vice superintendent at the time. So. Or maybe a little bit of both. I think maybe she transitioned in the time that I was there. So I have known her for a long time because of that.
Yeah, you served in the Senate with her.
Yeah, no, it's a small world.
And then, of course, our school superintendent, Mike Henry, is an Ava fella, and he's probably not quite the same age as you, but
no, but in the ballpark.
Close,
I mean,
you knew him, I'm sure, and his family. And
yeah, I mean, I forget, and we have discussed this before, but I forget the exact year that he graduated. But yeah, we would have been
good
in the same vicinity. Yeah.
And Mike's doing a great job here at Marshfield. So Ava has produced some good folks serving our communities for sure. Well, Curtis, I think it's important. Did you have any brothers and sisters growing up?
No, I was only child.
Only child, okay.
So I don't know if that explains anything or not. But
well, I don't know. I was an only child, so I can't tell you. Anyway, you went to MSU, got your undergrad, then went to Mizzou, and
St. Louis University.
I'm sorry, St. Louis University, and then.
Although we love Mizzou too.
Well, yeah, I know, absolutely. And then what'd you do when you first graduated?
So as soon as I got out of law school, passed the bar, and I was looking for, get my feet wet in the legal profession. But as things turned out, a local personality, auctioneer, radio show host named Billy Long was running for Congress, and I'd always been interested in politics. I love history. I love politics.
Was that 2010?
Yeah, that was 2010. I graduated law school in '09. Yes, and you were running for rep for the first time. I remember that.
Right.
Because some of that district was in Greene County.
It was
back then. So we would see each other at events,
exactly.
and kind of got to know each other then. But he was, so I joined his campaign as his first full-time staffer, and then after he was successful, I spent a little bit of time in Washington D.C. as his deputy chief of staff. Worked on policy. I was one of the guys that was from the district, so anything that affected the 7th district. I was involved in committee work on things like transportation, commerce, manufacturing, trade, tax issues, anything that affected the district.
Right.
So that was a really unique experience, and you learned a lot about how government works, or in our case, more specifically, how it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And some of the things that need to be fixed.
Yeah. The 7th district then was mainly Rogersville, I believe. And then, of course, now it has Seymour area. I mean, the southern part of the county. But
yeah,
I think it only had.
It didn't have a lot of Webster at that time. No,
the city of Rogersville.
But it did have a little bit. Yeah,
it had a little bit. So you began doing that in 2010, and then the opportunity came along for you to run for rep. So tell us about that.
So I left Congressman Long's service in the 7th district and began practicing law. Did Social Security disability for a while, and then the 133rd district came open, which was at the time in Southwest Springfield, and covered the city of Battlefield. And so I ran for that seat, was successful, and served in the House for 6 years.
And that then the opportunity to run for Senate.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually still would have 2 years left in the House, right?
Technically.
Because you didn't term out. It just the opportunity to run for Senate came up.
Well, and ironically, the same person vacated each seat for me to run. So the 133rd district had been now Congressman Burleson's House seat,
Uh-huh.
and he termed out, ran for that, and then
Right.
he was the 20th district senator, and then he chose to run for Congress and not seek his second term.
Mhm.
So ran for that seat and was ultimately successful.
Absolutely. And of course, it's always good to run in an open seat and not one where you're
Yeah, I
running
mean,
against an incumbent.
it's
That's tough.
yeah, that's kind of one of the adages of politics is that it's really hard to run against incumbents. The incumbent retention rate in the country at all levels of government is pretty high. I think
Right.
it's in the 90 plus percentile,
Right.
which is kind of ironic because nobody likes Congress, but everybody likes their congressman.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true. Well, almost true.
Well, not always, but 90 some odd percent
Yeah.
of the
Right.
time.
Numbers game. Um, I will say this, Curtis, getting acquainted with him in the house and the dynamics, the atmosphere of Jeff City and the legislature is different. It's changing all the time, but it's quite a bit different than it was when I first got elected. Social media
Hmm.
has
Yeah.
certainly affected that and made lots of uh, what you almost want to say divisions amongst the parties and various fractions, you might say, and it's not all good. Maybe some of it is, but I will tell you this: that Curtis is a stand up guy, one that I always found to will do what he says and appears to want to try to work to get what's done the best done for the constituents and not necessarily his own uh, you know career or whatever like some do. And
Well,
we appreciate that. I
yeah.
really do. And I just think that a lot of people may not know you that well yet. And those of us that do, it's always good to be able to hit on the things that we believe are important. And I believe that, you have done that in your time up there at this point. You'll always listen no matter, you may not always agree, but certainly will always listen. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, and it has been a lot different since I was a freshman, since you and I were up there
Absolutely.
together.
Absolutely.
I remember, you were always, extremely kind and helpful to me, and helped me with my legislation, and
Right.
help me figure things out, which. Especially in the era of term limits, I think is really important for your more senior members to do, because nobody's going to be there for very long.
That's
Right?
right.
Like everybody's going to term out pretty quickly, and so what are you doing to help the continuity for your region?
Right.
And in Southwest Missouri, I think has been lucky to have a pretty strong delegations down through the years, and to have people that work pretty well together. And I think if you're in politics for very long, I think like you said earlier, people that kind of put their own personal ambitions ahead of doing the duties of their office. I think folks down here realize that if you want to, that the best way to audition for the next job, if indeed you want the next job, is to do a good job with what you've got,
Mhm.
and to be a good steward of what the people have already entrusted you with, and
Right.
not just to be looking at the horizon.
Yeah, and do what you say you're going to do. I
Yeah.
think people again will always give you
Hmm.
the benefit of not always agreeing, but do what you say you'll do,
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot of credibility, that goes along with that. So
Hmm.
I thought, again, we're not here today to really get into political um, talk like you hear on the talk shows. That's not what we're here about. What we're here is to number one, document history. That's why we do Marshfield Old School Times. You are our state senator. And again, if you were a Democrat, you would also be invited, and it doesn't matter
Hmm.
the politics, the party. It's important that we have a connection to be able to listen to the constituents, and vice versa. So I think that's why I wanted to bring you on and make sure people got, you're not running for office this year. So,
No, it's
so it's not
it's
that.
a great year not to be
Yeah.
on the
If you were, I
ballot.
might not have you on here.
Yeah.
No, you're not, your term isn't up. You're in the middle of the term.
Yeah.
So you'll be our senator another couple of years. So,
Hmm.
but I thought we might talk about some issues that are topics up there right now that
Hmm.
you are involved in, or that
Yeah.
you I know you're the chairman of the Education Workforce Development Committee in the Senate,
Yeah.
which is a very important committee. Obviously, education is a hot topic
Hmm.
all over the country,
Oh yeah.
and certainly workforce development has been, I know, been a priority basically for the Parson administration.
Oh yeah, big time.
And
Very much so.
there's been a lot of good positive things done with workforce development over the last several years. So why don't you kind of talk a little bit about some of the topics right now?
Well, one of the big ones that's sort of been going through the General Assembly for the last few years and has continued to be a pretty big issue this year is the initiative petition reform. So, you know, I mean, you know this, and anyone that pays much attention at all to Missouri politics knows that it's very easy to change the Constitution here in the state. It's a 50% plus one proposition, and so you've seen things like the recreational marijuana a couple years ago,
I've heard about that.
Medicaid expansion. There like all these different ballot initiatives get proposed, and our Constitution has turned into a fairly thick document at this point, a fairly thick book. You've got bingo in there. You've got just all these different things, which is fine. But a lot of these issues maybe would be a better fit if they were statutes, because even it's hard to know exactly how a law is going to play out until it's in effect and you've seen it in operation for a while, and sometimes there needs to be changes made, and that's what the General Assembly is for, to have a continual evaluation of how government is operating and make adjustments where it's needed, and it's very difficult to do that if you have to go back to the Constitution each time. And I think also, from a philosophical viewpoint, and even somewhat from a pragmatic viewpoint, you really want your constitutions to be consensus documents. You want those to be the product of more than just bare majoritarian of society. Those are the guiding principles that our government operates under, and so I think you want to have as broad a societal consensus on what those documents are, how government operates, what its duties are. Those are things that we should try to have, as much buy-in as possible from society. So, what the initiative petition reform that the Senate has passed out this year would do is require that not only would a proposed ballot initiative pass with 50% plus one of the vote, it would also have to have a majority in 5 out of the 8 congressional districts in the state. And so you bring a little bit of that, broader consensus kind of mechanic into the process. And keep in mind, this is 50% plus one of the people who show up to vote at the election, not of the total electorate of all eligible individuals.
Right.
And so a lot of the amendments that are passing are actually passing with less than half of the people in the state
Which
that are
there's only
eligible to
like
vote.
which there's only like 60%, I think, that register used to be
Yeah.
that are registered that
Mhm.
are eligible to vote to
Mhm.
begin with. So you're really talking about
Mhm.
30% or something like that of eligible.
In some cases where they're a
Yeah.
close issue,
Right.
yeah.
Uh, of course, the initiative petition, as you mentioned, to do it for the constitutional amendment.
Mhm.
I think the Constitution, when our original drafters, of course, the state's different than the national Constitution, but
Mhm.
but even if you go back and look in 1945, when the last constitutional convention was held in Missouri,
Mhm.
we had about 6 volumes or sets of 6 books of that made up that constitution then,
Yeah.
with the changes that were made.
Mhm.
Now I think that volume, if you bound it, would be like 25 books.
Oh, you mean like the statute,
The
like
statute
like the
books.
full
Yeah.
statute books of
Yeah.
the state. Oh yeah,
And-
those
and-
have gotten much larger
And
too.
of course,
Mhm.
which that's fine because that's where those changes should take place.
Mhm.
But what's happened, the Constitution itself, if it was 50 pages long, now it's 150, and I may have the numbers
Yeah.
wrong because of
But
all
yeah.
the details that
Mhm.
is occurring with medical marijuana or with Medicaid
Mhm.
expansion or whatever it is. We're
Mhm.
detailing all that out in the Constitution
Mhm.
instead of in the statute done by the legislature. So
Mhm.
it's a little confusing, I think, to
Yeah.
people, but I think they should understand these initiative petitions are just really tying the hands, so to speak, of the
Mhm.
constituents, and then you can't go back and amend and change it. And by having
Yeah.
that 50% plus one, and where you don't try to give a majority in each congressional district,
Mhm.
I mean, St. Louis could pass anything they wanted.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, you have no geographic representation. And of course, land doesn't vote, but there's people that live on that land and they'd
Hmm.
like to have a say too.
Right.
And again, like this is a very large state. It has a very diverse population across the state,
Hmm.
has very diverse economic interests. We have everything from very rural farming and agricultural to mining, industrial, tourism, all kinds of manners of commerce in the state. And so having all those different interests and all those different cultures represented in whatever we're doing, I think is important.
Right. Absolutely. What other topics are you discussing right now? I know, obviously, life and uh,
Hmm.
Second Amendment issues are always prevalent. Is there anything going on with those two subjects?
So there is a an effort. If you'll recall, a few years ago, we began defunding. There's a separation of taxpayer money from the provision of abortion services. So you had the defunding of Planned
Hmm.
Parenthood, and all that was done in the budget. The Supreme Court subsequently said, well, that looks too much like legislation. You're not supposed to legislate in the budget. And so that was deemed like an invalid way to achieve that policy objective.
Hmm.
So there is an effort this year to pass a statutory change that would put some guardrails and prevent taxpayer money from being used by entities that provide abortion.
Right. Hmm.
Mhm. But that I should also hasten to add there are no abortions being performed in Missouri right now.
Right. Hmm.
So
Right.
this has been an issue on which there's been a great deal of success.
Hmm. And on Second Amendment, anything going on there?
Uh, you know, I don't think there's any major legislation at this point. A lot of it is playing defense. There's always a threat of the implementation of like a red flag law, um, where you would basically without adjudication take away someone's gun rights. Um, uh, and I think for any constitutional right, Second Amendment or any other constitutional right, there should be an extreme amount of due process that is available before there should be any conversation about whether or not that right can be abridged in any way.
Hmm.
And so typically, if you wanted to prevent someone from owning a firearm, you'd have to show they're basically they need a guardian. Like there's a great degree of disability or some kind of something going on there that would be extraordinary. And it would not be enough just for the mere assertion that there could be some kind of problem.
Hmm.
And so, making sure that the existing rights that we have around the Second Amendment not be abridged, not be, reduced in any way, is really, I think, is really where it's at right now, as opposed to new legislation
Hmm.
regarding guns, because we have uh, basically we have constitution carry in this state.
Hmm.
Like you don't have to have a license to carry a gun. It's a very expansive right, one of the strongest Second Amendment states in the country.
Right. Let's talk about funding. Funding for, like,
Hmm.
last year, you passed I-70 funding, which was a
Hmm.
huge, huge um, undertaking to be able to get that done. I know I traveled I-70 a lot, for about 4 years there,
Hmm.
and then of course I-44. We're all familiar with
Hmm.
how with the concerns with 44, specifically right here from about Lebanon to Mount Vernon. I mean, it's terrible. It's really bad. The
Yeah.
traffic at Kansas and I-44
Yeah.
and even at
Dangerous.
65
Yeah.
and Glenstone, it's all dangerous. And
Hmm.
so, um, I know to get that I-70 money, it was a big challenge. You had
Hmm.
federal money coming down, ARPA money, FRA money, whatever it's called. But what about I-44? What's the status there?
So the House has begun to put forward its budgetary plans. The chairman of the House Budget Committee, Cody Smith, also a guy we both served with, um, has put substantial funding into the budget for I-44 expansion and refurbishment. So we'll of course there's still a lot of process left. That's got to come to the Senate. The governor still has to sign it into law. But I'm very hopeful that we can get a pretty substantial package that will take us a long way down the road toward having a really strong refurbishment for I-44 that will include 3-lane expansion for the areas around Springfield that we were just discussing that are extremely dangerous for anyone that's trying to use those
So now I-70,
turnoffs.
the package on I-70 was actually making it 3-lane all the way from St. Louis or Winsfield
Yeah.
to Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea for 44 right now would just be widening it in the Springfield area for now. Is that
So I think it's got to be done in stages,
Uh-huh.
and so I think you're going to see it kind of start in Southwest Missouri, and then hopefully it will go up the rest of the state, because really the whole thing needs to be redone.
Yeah, there's opportunity all
Um,
along the way. Although they have done a
yeah.
lot of work on bridges.
Yes.
I think the bridge program that was implemented a few years ago, that's been a huge success. And I can't remember how many bridges they've done, but it's in the hundreds.
Yeah, it was a substantial number, and the bridges were, getting very old.
Right.
And fortunately, we've had strong legacy infrastructure in the state, but at some point you do have to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and not only for safety, but also it's very important for commerce.
Right.
We have a lot of trucking in Southwest Missouri. We have a lot of manufacturing all along the corridor. And if you don't have sufficient transportation access, you're just not able to sustain all that business.
I know at Northview they've just began working on the bridge there at where Highway B crosses 44 at Northview, and I didn't really realize it until I began working, work part time at Roast Ready Mix in the safety position,
Mm-hmm.
and the exit ramp. If you're coming down from the bridge, turning west from Northview, turning west to get on 44, that bridge is on a curve, and it's extremely dangerous to take a ready mix truck down that bridge, down that ramp. And I didn't really realize that.
Well, I've never tried it, but I'll
Well,
take your word for it.
Next time you go that direction, you've just about got to be almost on the pavement, on the road, on the I-44 before you can see back behind where
Mm-hmm.
the traffic coming in. So and I think
Well,
that's
it's probably
maybe,
only worse than a ready mix truck.
well, it is, but any
Yeah.
kind of a truck,
Yeah.
but if you look at it, it's built on a curve there, and so
Mhm.
there's opportunities like that need to be looked at all up and down 44, not just in
Yeah.
the Springfield area. And I think, and MoDOT's very aware of most of
Mm-hmm.
those.
Well, and that is the goal, is to do the entire section in Missouri from one place to the other,
Right.
from one end to the other. And I've always heard the engineers, I'm not an engineer, but they've always said, that there's a lot of, because the weight, the amount of traffic that goes over that, you break up the foundation of the road over time.
Sure.
And so a lot of work needs to be done,
Right.
I think, to extend the life of that out for another decades, that we need to have it
Exactly.
extended. Mm-hmm.
I want to also mention to the viewers that Curtis was very instrumental and very helpful in helping procure the funding for our new sewer system that's going to be implemented here in Marshfield out around the new overpass.
Mm-hmm.
We were fortunate enough to get that overpass done during my tenure and get some funding through MoDOT for that. But it left us kind of high and dry out there without sewer to be able to develop and move forward. And so through the efforts of Curtis and Representative John Black and Senator Lincoln Huff, who was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations, we were able to get they were the some money for Marshfield to get that in, and so that's very important. And Curtis, we appreciate your help on that.
Yeah, no, I mean
The city does.
those are the kind of things that it's only makes sense. You got as the old saying goes, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah,
And infrastructure is one of the things that government can and should do fairly
that's
well.
right.
Um, it's the kind of projects what government does poorly is continual programs.
Hmm.
Spending that is recurrent over and over and over again. One time projects
Right.
where you have a clear, definable outcome. That is usually your best use of taxpayer funds, in my experience.
So this year probably will be the last year of the excess funding coming back from the feds. Correct?
Yeah, and that's slowed way down even as it is. I mean that had to all be there was a date certain where that had to be spent, and so really, if you were waiting until that date, you probably weren't going to be able to use it, and it would go back
Yeah.
to the feds. And let me tell you, they don't unprint that money. It
Yeah.
just gets used somewhere
Somewhere
else.
else. Yeah.
Uh,
That's why we need to get all we could because it's going somewhere.
yeah, no, it's one of those things where no matter how you feel about the federal government creating those programs and the federal government putting that money into the hands of the states, um, once that decision was made, then our only decision that was left to us was how best to use it in a way that's responsible.
And I think you all have done a really good job with that when pertaining to roads and bridges. That's
Mhm.
to me about the number one place that we ought to be putting it.
Well, the hope is that by using it to purchase this kind of necessary infrastructure that the state was going to have to purchase anyway, in the long run, this reduces the tax
That's
burden
right.
on the public.
Especially
And
at a local level.
yeah, and the public's already paid in taxes to the federal government. It's already so if we're getting some of that money back, we should do it in a way that reduces their Missouri tax burden.
Absolutely. And of course, those two highways, those two major highways, and I think we could add
Mhm.
Highway 60 into that as well.
Mhm.
Um, they're carrying loads just through the state where we may not got to get a direct benefit, but the traffic certainly, going through and damaging and using our roads or wear
Yeah,
and tear at least. So
yeah,
again, that federal money helps to rebuild and keep
defray
up the
some of that.
maintenance on that.
Yeah.
Speaking of Highway 60,
Hmm.
what a great thing to be able to be finally getting some interchanges on in Webster County. Webster County
Hmm.
was the last piece of the puzzle, the
Hmm.
last piece, all the way from where Highway 60 hits I-44 out at James River, north of Republic,
Hmm.
all the way to the you might say the state line, east side of the state.
Hmm.
Webster County had the the, the least amount of interchanges and the worst traffic and even stoplights on Highway 60, and so
Hmm.
finally we're getting that taken care of. And again, hats off to MoDOT and the funding that it's taken to get that done. I know the Diggins project
Hmm.
is getting ready to get started, and of course now they're trying to figure Seymour out,
Hmm.
and obviously the project at Rogersville there at 125,
Hmm.
which is actually in Greene County, but still it's right there close to our county line,
Yeah.
and that's all good. It's all good
Yeah,
stuff.
we had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion trying to move that process along, and kind of recognize some of the unique characteristics of this area that maybe MoDOT it doesn't deal with in other parts of the state. I think we probably have a higher amount of buggy traffic in some of those areas in the south part of the county than MoDOT deals with in most other parts of the state, and so getting them to kind of recognize
Yeah,
some of those unique challenges that have to be dealt
right.
with.
And I'll put a plug in for a second overpass at Seymour since it's cheap and doesn't cost anything on my show, right?
That's right.
So you can take that back to MoDOT when you go too. They need one. It needs to be done now and done right
I'll let them know you
instead of
figured out the
instead of,
price.
instead
So.
of piecemeal. Well, that's not my job.
Oh, okay.
But we want to help our neighbors to the south here.
Yes,
But,
absolutely.
what else, Curtis? Is there any other topics coming up? I mean, you're looking at 2 more years in the Senate, and then you'd probably be ready for a second term or whatever else you decide to do. But
Hmm.
you're going to be around state politics for a while. You're young. You've got a bright future ahead. of you, and again, you're building up your reputation as a person that will sit down on both sides and listen and try to come to a consensus in some cases. So, what do you see on the horizon in the future? I know education is going to be a big topic, and it is now. Carl Esslinger is going to be our
Yeah,
new director of DESE, which
yeah.
is, I think, a real plus for the state.
Yeah, I think so
So,
too. I think that's going to be a really big deal
mhm.
because ultimately the legislature, if the state if state government is a ship, the legislature is more of like the wind in the sails. Like you're not really steering it, but you're trying to move it in the right direction. Or maybe in a more corporate metaphor, you're kind of like the board of directors. Like you're setting the broad agenda, you're setting the kind of the guidelines of what should happen, but it's really those executive branch officials that are driving the ship, that are the CEOs of the agencies and of the state. And so having good personnel in those positions that understand the agencies that they oversee, and being able to guide those agencies in the right direction is really important. I think Senator Esslinger will excel in that role. Uh, so yes, I foresee education continuing to be an issue in the years ahead. I think everyone still kind of expects the economy to continue to sort of slow down and have some structural challenges that have resulted from all the money that was spent, as we just discussed earlier. Has caused some inflation in society. There's still the after effects of the COVID shutdowns. You saw a lot of job loss that has not fully come back. You saw a lot of lost productivity that you can never get back, and that contributes to headwinds on the economy. And so probably one of the challenges in the next couple of years will be how to manage a budget that is still expected to grow naturally as the economy grows, the budget grows with it, but probably does so at a slower pace than maybe we have seen in the last few years, and what that means for government. So I think the next administration is going to have both a challenge and an opportunity to streamline state government, to kind of reimagine uh, the agencies that the governor oversees, and find ways to make state government more efficient, and to deliver the services that the public expects, but to do so in a smarter, more efficient way. And so I'm very hopeful. The legislature will obviously have a big role in helping make that happen. And so I'm looking forward to that. Economic development is always a big issue, and that's there's a lot of different policies that go into economic development. What does your regulatory profile look like? What does your state's tax profile look like? How well are you retaining the best and brightest students that you're graduating from your state's institutions? How well are you attracting new capital into the state that wants to invest in job creation in the state? And so those are all factors that go into that, and so there's a tremendous amount of work to be done on all those fronts to make Missouri even more competitive than it already is, because we're competing with all the states around us, and with the rest of the country, and in some cases the rest of the globe, to attract these jobs and opportunities to the state.
Yeah, it's the budget you mentioned when I first got elected. I think we were looking at about a 27, 28 billion-dollar budget.
hmm
Um,
which
and
is a little deceptive in insofar as that's not all
I
state
know,
money.
yeah, I understand
A
that.
lot of that
Yeah,
is federal
yeah, it
money.
is. But now your budget this year is going to be what,
It's
50,
around 50,
around
yeah.
50 billion,
hmm
which people think, my goodness gracious, that's just unbelievable. But then if you think about it, 2010 to
hmm
2024, that's 14 years.
Yeah.
And even if you look at like the rule of 72, or if
hmm
you look at inflation, just regular inflation over a
Mhm.
14-year period,
Hmm.
you could see where the budget could double in theory.
Yeah.
And that's just looking at your normal CPI increases on things,
Hmm.
your wages, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
But you're right. Some of that you might explain a little bit about the break, just quickly a breakdown of that 50
Yeah,
some million.
of that 50, about I think about 13 of it is what we call GR, general revenue,
Uh-huh.
which is actually the state's portion of that. And the rest of it is federal pass-through money. And as you said, there's been a lot of inflation there, particularly in healthcare. If you'll recall, a few years ago, the public voted to expand Medicaid in the state. And so that has, also contributed to the
Right.
increase in the size of that program. Um, and so you've got a lot of spending that the state doesn't really have discretion over. It passes through our budget, but we don't really get to choose whether or not
Right.
it's being spent. So it's really that $13 billion that is what the General Assembly is making decisions
Controls.
over, and even that control is not as absolute as you might think. Like there's a constitutional in the Missouri Constitution, there's a provision that says a quarter of GR has to be spent on education.
That's right.
So,
I
and of
say.
course, we're north of a quarter of the budget. I think it's around 30% or something to that effect. But certainly there are constraints that the public have put on how that money is spent,
Right.
even before you get to the federal money. And I'd also hasten to add that the budget has continued to grow. The amount of revenue has continued to grow, even as the General Assembly has cut taxes substantially in the state, which has held down
Hmm.
some of the growth in the budget.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
the state income tax was
hmm.
was it 6% about when
Hmm.
I started,
I
and
think
now it's
that's right.
around
Yeah.
four and a half
Hmm.
maybe.
Yeah, and a
And
lot of that is it was built in where as the revenues increased,
right,
taxes would go
right.
down automatically, and so you never had less money, but you slowed the rate of growth
I
in a
don't think
way.
anybody could argue that that has not been successful because
Hmm.
obviously the income has continued to rise and
Yeah.
at a rate higher than the CPI, and yet our tax rate has lowered.
Well, and for those that love economics out there, that's the sort of the principle behind the Laffer curve,
Right.
which is a kind of a theoretical economic construct, but basically says that at some point, if your tax rates are too high and you lower taxes, the increased economic growth will cause you to get more revenue on a
Exactly.
lower tax rate.
Exactly.
And that appears to have been the case here in Missouri because our revenues have continued to grow even as they've grown as we have lowered the tax burden on the public. And so, yeah, I think that's been very successful. And because we want to have as low a tax burden on society as possible. And of course, another thing that has really benefited the public is the balanced budget requirement here in the state. We have to have a balanced budget requirement. We could only wish that the federal government was similarly
Right.
bound,
Yeah.
but unfortunately they're not. But that means we don't have a huge debt burden here in Missouri that we're trying to feed.
Right.
And if you look at the federal budget, uh, look how much of the federal budget is consumed by interest payments on the debt, and that is money that does not get to be used on goods and services and things that the public wants. That's just paying money to service the debt.
What percentage is that now of our federal
Ah,
budget? It's
it's
like half or more, isn't it?
it's I mean
It's a ridiculous
it's
amount.
not quite that high, but I think it eclipsed
It's
it eclipsed the military budget. I
yeah,
think so. I mean
it's the number one.
it is large and
Line
growing,
item.
and
Yeah.
but we're not weighed down by that here in Missouri. We
No,
don't have this huge outstanding public debt that we're having to pay massive interest
but
rates
you
on.
have to admit, you have to laugh when you see the political ads and the spin out there that I'm going to run because I'm going to make sure that Missouri balances their budget, or I've helped balance the budget. Well, it's a constitutional law that it has to be
Yeah.
balanced. I mean, we don't have an option. That's the one thing. I think that's really the only thing you as a legislature have to do,
Is
right?
past
Is to
budget.
pass a budget, and it
Yeah.
has to be balanced.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's part of the rhetoric that we hear in
Well,
campaigning. But
I mean,
it's
I
true.
mean, I
It's true.
appreciate them doing it because I mean, ultimately, it's it is both a requirement, but also if your General Assembly doesn't do it right, then they pass a lot of power into the hands of the governor,
That's
because the
true.
governor has the ultimate responsibility to make sure that the budget is balanced, even if that means that the governor has to withhold
Yes,
money that has
true.
been
That's
appropriated.
true. Yeah.
And so if you over appropriate, you overspend,
Yeah.
and you end up not having the money to cover it, then you just have ceded to the governor the ability to decide what gets spent
That's
where.
true. That's right.
So it's a requirement, but also it's important that you do it right.
That's right. That's right. No, that's true. So speaking of politics, again, I said we weren't going to talk about. Well, we're not going to specifically talk about one politic side or the other, but I will say this: after spending, 8 years in the legislature, another 4 in the Department of Health, and
Mhm.
being exposed and learning all that I could about state government, um, when we turn on the cable news channels, I still call them that. I guess that's what they are. I don't know. But when we turn them on, when we turn those on, the national news channels, and we hear this channel, and this is black, and we turn this channel on, they say no, that it's white, and whatever it might be.
You're
Um,
invited to believe whichever
it,
version of
it's
reality you'd like.
it's just disgusting, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably all kinds of people contributing to that. But I want to say this about my time in the Missouri State Legislature: 98% of the people up there are good, hardworking people, just like Curtis and like I hope and try to be, trying to do the right thing. And the rhetoric that we hear is, a lot of it is just made up stories, made up stuff to sell. It's all about money, and it's all about getting somebody elected or whatever it might be that they're trying to get across. But I think people lose faith in the government. They lose faith in their public officials. It bothers me a little bit when I hear politician jokes. Not if it's a real joke, but if I mean there are people that really take it so seriously, and they friendships are lost over it. It's just really sad, honestly, Curtis. And I think that
Well, yeah.
those of us that know really what goes on, people are trying to do the right thing. And again, they may not agree on
Yeah.
how to get there, but the end result is we want a better state to live in. We want our
Hmm.
kids to get educated. We want protect life. We want to be able to have personal property
Hmm.
rights and all those things.
Yeah, there's nothing happening in Washington D.C. that's worth a personal friendship in your community.
Right.
Like your neighbor is someone that knows you and shares the same community as you,
Right.
the same culture as you, and that person, that like you're giving up a real person for you know whatever narrative is coming out of Washington D.C. That's a horrible trade.
Hmm. And I think up until the last few years with social media, we had been able to kind of stay above that in state politics. But it does seem
Yeah.
like, especially when campaign season rolls around, we kind of start going down that path. And I know
Well,
you had some ads ran against you, and you and I talked
yeah.
about them that were just ridiculous. They were so negative. And the sad thing is the way the ethics system and the campaign funding and all of that is now.
Hmm.
The person, your opponent, may have not even really controlled that. I mean,
No,
there's
and
PAC money out there. There's all
yeah.
these groups out there. There's groups that want to weigh in on every
Hmm.
issue. I mean, why would you? Why
Well,
would why would pro life groups want to weigh in on a highway funding bill or something?
yeah.
And it's going on all the time. But
Well,
it's
and
not it's not the elected person. It's these other people.
no, because the campaign finance laws have created this scenario where the money that used to go to campaigns and would then get spent by the candidates now goes to PACs, which by law cannot interact with or coordinate with the
The
candidates that
candidate.
they're
Yeah.
supporting or are
Right.
obviously opposing.
Right.
And so what happens is you have basically people who are unaccountable, whose name are not on the ballot, who just you know create whatever kind of campaign that they want.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think that the one of the unintended side effects of desire to get money out of politics was just to make money less accountable to the political process. Um, but I mean, we're here now,
We are.
and so we can only control what we do as individuals, as candidates,
Right.
as elected officials or as individuals. And so I tell people, just do the right thing and don't worry what other people are doing.
Exactly, and get to know your elected officials, and that's
Yeah.
why we're here today. That's why I want to bring Curtis on the show. I want people to get to know our elected officials. Again, if he were a Democrat, we would do the same thing, and I would encourage people that align with the Republican philosophy to go to Lincoln Days, get to
Yeah.
know these people, meet these people. Those that align with the Democrat philosophy or the Independent,
Mhm.
go to your events, go to the meet and greets, and get to know who the candidates are, and get to know them, and do your homework.
Mhm.
Align yourself with whatever party that fits your, what the way you believe, and I think we should always respect that. We used to in the old days. We used to do that,
And I
and I
find
would
that
like to see us
your
return to
elected
that.
officials are very accessible. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
if you go to some of these community events, I mean, I try to go to as many things as I can,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of other people do too. And you're usually in a small setting, or you're at a street fair, like on the square or something, or you're at a Lincoln Day style event, which maybe has like 100 or 2 people at it. Your elected officials, even many of your statewide elected officials, are just standing around there, and they'd love nothing more than to talk to
Absolutely, absolutely.
you. Like, they would be delighted to talk to a voter.
And it's not easy. Like even with you with Dade County, County,
Mhm.
Barton County, if you've got
Mhm.
an event over in Lamar or
Yeah, you may have to
somewhere,
travel an hour or something to
and
get to it.
you've been to an event this morning, you mentioned
Hmm.
it, and it
Hmm.
takes away from family time,
Hmm.
but it is important, and it's important to and they're not. You can actually press flex. You can actually get to meet the person,
Yeah.
look them in the eye, and you can tell if they're
And you can have a
a little bit
meaningful
about what they're about.
conversation with them if you
Yeah,
have a specific thing that you
right,
care about that you want to talk about.
right.
In my experience, they're going to be happy to talk to you about that.
When when the city of Marshfield was looking for some help with the funding for the sewer system, you know, they met with Curtis and more than willing and absolutely 100% behind helping them to get that. When we were looking at redistricting issues there, and they were kind of carving Webster County up the way
Oh, yeah.
the congressional redistricting, where we wanted to keep it whole, and we ended up being
Hmm.
split. But you certainly, along with Representative Black and all the other
Hmm.
folks, tried to was always accommodating to people, and so that's important.
We kicked up as much fuss as we
Yeah,
could from the
yeah, yeah,
house.
yeah. So now I don't get any. I get no propaganda from Congressional District 4, but I get all of Burleson stuff, which I'm not in his
Yeah.
district, but I know him, and
Yeah.
that's the way it
Well,
is. So anyway,
and I mean, your congressional folks are kind of the same way. They go to a lot of events.
they
You
do.
can probably just find them and talk to them.
And you know what? I suspect if I had an issue, I could visit with Burleson's office, and he would make sure that I got that
Oh yeah,
information to the right people. And
yeah,
so,
absolutely.
where you're all representatives,
Hmm.
especially when you have that personal relationship. So,
Hmm.
well, Curtis, what's on the horizon for you? What do you see down the road for yourself?
Well, I mean, for me
Well,
personally,
yeah,
so
well, the state or whatever, or
I,
both.
I love, I really enjoy being in the legislature. I like thinking about public policy. I
Hmm.
like, a lot of it is negotiating, trying to bring all the different uh, people to the table and try to talk through the problem, try to figure out if there's a solution to their problem
Right.
in a way that maybe accommodates everyone. I kind of view, the elected official, like there's so many different interest groups and people that come to the General Assembly and advocate for their position. There's one group of people who are there to advocate for the public as a whole, and that is your elected officials. And so, I kind of take that view as I approach these issues that come up before the General Assembly. Personally, I think the state Senate is the political office in the state that has the most impact on policy from like a longitudinal viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
like the ability to make a difference year after year in a steady, methodical way. I think the Senate is the absolute best place to do that. And so, if the public will send me back, I plan to be in the Senate as long as they'll allow me to be there.
There you go. And that would be one more
Which
term.
which is one more term, yeah. Like you said, no one's there for
Right,
very long.
right.
You get termed out pretty quick.
Well, I think keep doing what you're doing and be open and willing to visit with folks as concerns come up.
Hmm.
I will say this: when I was the director of the medical marijuana program, we haven't talked about that much on the show, but Curtis was always one of those that listened and always appeared to support what we were trying to do in keeping a well-regulated program and one that didn't get out of hand like some of the states have. And I always appreciated those legislators that did that. Certainly, Representative Black did the same. Our state rep, and they had, I think, the constituents' heart. I mean, they believe that we need to protect young people and protect people from illegal activities, and so I appreciated that.
Well, it was easy to be supportive because you were very conscientious and you were clearly doing a good job, and you were going above and beyond.
Tried to,
Like you see people that work in government, in the agencies, and you can tell the ones that go above and beyond. You were always one of those.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. But I think we're getting close here to wrapping up. Anything final words? I think we got about 3 minutes. If there's anything final you'd like to say, well, now's the time.
I think we've had a pretty far-ranging discussion here. I mean, I always tell folks I'm easy to get a hold of. Call my office, send the email if you find yourself in Jefferson City. I always tell folks I can give you, 10 minutes in Jefferson City if we're in session. I can give you, an hour or however long it takes back in the district, and so
today.
just like today. I love to meet with people in the district where you have time to really talk to them and learn about their issues. And so I just encourage anyone that's listening out there, if there is a way that I can be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out to my office, and I'll do my best to help you out and do my best to meet with you and do whatever needs to be done.
Very good. There's 34 senators, I believe, in the state.
Yes, 34 senators.
And so we have 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis. So, not every county gets a Senate representative. And we were very fortunate with Senator Clemens and then Senator Cunningham. Then, of course, we had Senator Wasson in there for a while and Senator Esslinger for a couple of years. But, we've been really fortunate to have folks that know Webster County, and I think Curtis is one of those. And I think that he grew up in an area similar to Webster County down in Douglas County and understands the rural way of life. And so we appreciate you and wish you the very best. And anytime you want to come back and update us on anything, why feel free to.
Sounds good. We'll do it.
All right, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Curtis.
Yeah, appreciate it very much.
Folks, we'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll be gone next week, but we'll have we are lining up shows for the month of April already, and I think you'll continue to enjoy our guests, and we'll continue to try to learn all we can about our area and the history of our area, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.